The Ukraine-Russia war has spread to rail lines, with Ukraine using drones to sever Russian military logistics. Russia guards its weapons trains with mobile air defenses, while Ukraine exploits transition windows. In 2025, a Ukrainian drone attack on a Russian train unleashed chaos, triggering a chain of events that reshaped the conflict. Below is the account of this confrontation, from an explosion on the tracks to an unforeseen outcome that horrified the world. On a foggy night in 2025, a Russian missile train thundered through Kursk. Ukrainian drones armed with precision-guided bombs targeted the munitions cars. Russian radar detected them too late. The drones dived like birds of prey, the first explosion ripping the middle car apart and chaining to others in a relentless cascade. Rails twisted like snakes, fire erupting into a colossal fireball, debris flying like a metal storm. Russian soldiers leapt from the train in panic, black smoke choking the sky. Alarms wailed across the region, rescue crews rushed in, but the train was already a burning wreck. The battlefield became a railway inferno, igniting a brutal logistics war. Russia struck back immediately, artillery from the border pounding Ukrainian positions in Sumy, shells shaking the earth. Russian Su-35 jets roared in, dropping bombs on Ukrainian supply depots. Ukraine countered with anti-radar missiles, destroying Russian air defense stations near the border. A ferocious air battle erupted, jets clashing in deadly pursuits amid smoke and fire. Relentless explosions lit the sky, turning the region into a chaotic war zone where every second pulsed with danger. The conflict surged into chemical warfare with terrifying speed. Russia launched missiles carrying toxic gas into Ukrainian positions, clouds of poison spreading and paralyzing soldiers. Ukraine retaliated with drones dispersing nerve agents, striking Russian convoys near the border. Cyber attacks crippled military ventilation systems, Russian hackers exposing Ukrainian positions, while Ukraine seized control of Russian chemical depots. On the ground, troops from both sides collapsed in agony, AI drones colliding and bursting into chemical fireballs. The war expanded as allies joined, turning the border into a multi-layered death zone. Russia launched a massive ground offensive, tanks rolling to seize Ukrainian rail hubs. Ferocious urban battles erupted in Kharkiv, buildings collapsing under fire. Ukraine ambushed with remote mines, incinerating Russian armor. A massive chemical explosion destroyed a weapons depot, contaminating rivers and displacing thousands. Neighboring nations were drawn in, Poland reinforcing its borders. The global economy reeled as rail lines were severed, satellite imagery showing vast regions shrouded in toxic smoke, marking a savage phase of warfare. The attack's fallout triggered a global environmental crisis. Toxins spread, poisoning soil and water, killing wildlife and crops en masse. Contaminated rivers flowed into Europe, causing food shortages as harvests failed. The US and EU organized emergency aid, but insurgent groups exploited the chaos to rise. Autonomous robots cleared contaminated zones, relief convoys delivering supplies under fire. Russia and Ukraine were forced into a temporary ceasefire due to the ecological disaster, but new rebel factions emerged. The crisis paused the war, but persistent pollution and famine signaled an unstable future. The Caribbean has long been a flashpoint for U.S.-Venezuela tensions, with U.S. anti-drug patrols clashing with cartels backed by Venezuelan protection. U.S. vessel interceptions often spark controversy, while Venezuela asserts maritime sovereignty with bold naval maneuvers. In 2025, a U.S. helicopter strike on a Venezuelan cartel boat escalated into a fierce confrontation, reshaping regional dynamics and alarming the world. Below is the account of this clash, from a high-seas strike to an outcome that left everyone reeling. At dawn in 2025, amidst the stormy Caribbean Sea near Venezuelan waters, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter USC GC James patrolled, its radar sweeping for threats. A Venezuelan cartel speedboat, laden with suspicious cargo, surged forward aggressively, broadcasting demands for the James to retreat. The James held its ground, searchlights piercing the rain. Tension crackled as cartel crew aimed weapons.
Suddenly, a Seahawk helicopter from the James roared into action, skimming low as its machine guns raked the cartel boat, sparks flying from bullet impacts. Missiles from the speedboat streaked toward the James, one detonating nearby, sending a towering water column skyward. The U.S. retaliated with Hellfire missiles, ripping through the cartel boat in a sprawling fireball. More cartel speedboats swarmed in, firing RPGs that rocked the cutter. U.S. gunners cut down attackers, bodies tumbling into churning waves. The storm intensified, waves crashing over decks as explosions lit the night. Smoke and debris cloaked the sea, turning the Caribbean into a chaotic war zone where every wave carried death. The strike ignited an immediate response. Additional Seahawk helicopters joined the fray, their missiles pounding cartel reinforcements, sending plumes of fire and smoke skyward. The cartel countered with anti-ship missiles from hidden coastal launchers, one grazing the James, shaking its hull. The U.S. deployed Harpoon missiles, obliterating a cartel command vessel in a thunderous blast. Cartel speedboats darted through the chaos, firing barrages of rockets that lit up the stormy sea. U.S. drones swept in, neutralizing attackers with precision strikes. The storm raged on, waves slamming both sides as explosions illuminated the darkness. The Caribbean became a relentless battlefield, each moment pulsing with destruction.
The conflict surged into electronic warfare with terrifying speed. Cartel forces jammed the James's radar with high-power signals, blinding its defenses. The U.S. countered with decoy drones, scrambling cartel missile locks. Cyber intrusions targeted the cutter's navigation systems, but onboard AI repelled the attack, hacking cartel communications and sowing chaos in their ranks. Drones from both sides clashed in mid-air explosions, flashing brightly in the storm. Cartel allies, backed by rogue state support, deployed fighter jets, but U.S. F-35s from Puerto Rico joined, turning the skies into a high-tech nightmare where invisible waves and firepower merged in pandemonium.
The clash drew in regional forces as Cuban and Nicaraguan vessels rushed to support the cartel, guns blazing in a multinational melee. U.S. destroyers arrived, their Tomahawk missiles obliterating cartel coastal batteries in earth-shaking blasts. A cartel submarine surfaced, launching torpedoes that rocked a U.S. frigate, debris flying in the blast. Coast Guard teams boarded cartel vessels, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat on pitching decks. Flames spread as spilled fuel ignited, engulfing coastal villages. Satellite imagery showed the Caribbean ablaze, marking a savage phase of warfare that engulfed the region.
The attack's fallout triggered a global sanctions crisis as nations condemned Venezuela's cartel ties, imposing bans that crippled its economy. Oil exports halted, causing shortages that rocked global markets. An international coalition formed to enforce blockades, but cartel-backed hackers disrupted global banking, freezing assets in retaliation. Relief ships faced pirate attacks, with cargo looted in the chaos. The U.S. led a multinational effort to restore maritime security, but rogue factions emerged, blending state and criminal actions. The crisis paused major warfare, but a fractured economy and persistent threats signaled an unstable future.
The Ukraine-Russia war has turned the Black Sea into a battleground, with Russia's floating fortresses, massive naval platforms, serving as critical command and supply hubs. Ukraine's advanced tactics have repeatedly outmaneuvered Russian defenses, exploiting moments of vulnerability. In 2025, a brutal Ukrainian attack on a Russian floating fortress unleashed chaos, reshaping the conflict and beyond. Below is the account of this clash, from a devastating strike to an outcome that shook the world.
On a moonless night in 2025, off the coast of Crimea, Russia's floating fortress, a $250 million naval platform bristling with missile launchers and radar, stood as a symbol of dominance. Ukrainian intelligence had tracked it for weeks, waiting for a high-profile supply transfer. As Russian crews loaded munitions, a swarm of Ukrainian stealth drones armed with electromagnetic pulse or EMP warheads descended silently. The drones detonated, unleashing a blinding EMP wave that fried the fortress's electronics, followed by hypersonic missiles that tore through its hull. The explosion lit the sea like a supernova, steel fragments raining down as the fortress listed violently. Alarms wailed, but the platform sank into the abyss, turning the Black Sea into a cauldron of fire and chaos. Russia retaliated with unrelenting fury. Warships launched a barrage of Zircon missiles, pounding Ukrainian coastal defenses in Odessa, reducing bunkers to rubble. Sub-30 jets screamed overhead, dropping precision bombs that shook the earth. Ukraine countered with anti-ship missiles, striking Russian frigates, sending plumes of fire and smoke skyward. A ferocious naval-air battle erupted, with drones and jets weeding through a storm of missiles. The sea churned with explosions, black smoke swallowing the horizon, transforming the Black Sea into a relentless war zone where every wave carried the scent of destruction. The conflict surged into electromagnetic warfare with terrifying speed. Russia deployed EMP-equipped drones to disable Ukrainian radar stations, plunging coastal defenses into darkness. Ukraine responded with advanced jammers, disrupting Russian satellite communications, blinding their fleet. AI-driven drones clashed in the skies, exploding in radiant bursts that lit the night. A Russian attempt to hack Ukrainian drone controls backfired, causing their own systems to crash. The war escalated as EMP pulses disrupted civilian power grids across the region, sparking panic. Allies on both sides joined, turning the Black Sea into a high-tech battlefield, where electromagnetic waves and firepower collided in a storm of chaos.
Russia launched a desperate amphibious assault to seize Ukrainian ports, deploying Marines and hovercraft under cover of darkness. Fierce urban battles erupted in Mariupol, with buildings collapsing under relentless artillery fire. Ukraine countered with laser-guided missiles, obliterating Russian landing craft in fiery explosions. A rogue EMP strike accidentally triggered a blackout across southern Russia, halting military operations and plunging cities into chaos. Neighboring nations, including Georgia and Turkey, reinforced their borders as the conflict threatened to spill over. The global economy buckled as oil and gas shipments stalled, and satellite imagery revealed the Black Sea coast shrouded in smoke, marking a savage new phase of warfare.
The attack's fallout sparked a global energy crisis. The destruction of the floating fortress and subsequent naval blockades halted critical Black Sea energy exports, sending oil and gas prices soaring. Nations scrambled to secure alternative supplies, but cyber attacks on pipeline networks worsened shortages. Insurgent groups exploited the chaos, seizing oil facilities in lawless zones. Autonomous drones were deployed to patrol contested waters, while relief ships faced ambushes. The US and EU brokered emergency energy deals, but new militant factions emerged, launching raids on weakened infrastructure. Russia and Ukraine, crippled by energy disruptions, agreed to a fragile truce, but the rise of insurgents and ongoing shortages signaled an unstable future. The Caribbean has long been a flashpoint for US-Venezuela tensions, with US naval patrols clashing with Venezuela's bold moves over oil routes and migration. US ship interceptions often spark controversy, while Venezuela asserts sovereignty with aggressive naval actions. In 2025, a rapid Venezuelan move against a US Navy ship escalated into a fierce confrontation, reshaping regional dynamics and alarming the world. Below is the account of this clash, from a high-seas ambush to an outcome that left everyone reeling.
At dawn in 2025, amidst a stormy Caribbean Sea near Venezuelan waters, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter USCGC James patrolled, its radar scanning for threats. A Venezuelan Navy frigate carrying suspicious cargo surged forward aggressively, broadcasting demands for the James to retreat. The James held its ground, searchlights piercing the rain. Tension crackled as Venezuelan sailors aimed weapons. Suddenly, the frigate rammed the James's hull, metal screeching in the storm. Alarms blared, crew scrambled in panic, and gunfire erupted across the waves. The Caribbean transformed into a powder keg, primed to explode with devastating force.
The ramming ignited an immediate response. Seahawk helicopters from the James lifted off, skimming low as machine guns raked the Venezuelan frigate, sparks flying from bullet impacts. Venezuelan missiles streaked toward the James, one detonating nearby, sending a towering water column skyward. The U.S. retaliated with harpoon missiles, tearing through the frigate's deck in a sprawling fireball. Venezuelan speedboats swarmed in, firing RPGs that rocked the cutter. U.S. gunners cut down attackers, bodies tumbling into churning waves. The storm intensified, waves crashing over decks as explosions lit the night. Smoke and debris cloaked the sea, turning the Caribbean into a chaotic war zone where every wave carried death. The conflict surged into electronic warfare with breakneck speed. Venezuela jammed the James's radar with high-power signals, blinding its defenses. The U.S. countered with decoy drones, scrambling Venezuelan missile locks. Cyber intrusions targeted the cutter's navigation systems, but onboard AI repelled the attack,
hacking Venezuelan communications and sowing chaos in their ranks. Drones from both sides clashed in mid-air explosions, flashing brightly in the storm. Venezuelan allies dispatched fighter jets, but U.S. F-35s from Puerto Rico joined, turning the skies into a high-tech nightmare where invisible waves and firepower merged in pandemonium. The standoff drew in regional forces as Cuban and Nicaraguan ships rushed to support Venezuela, guns blazing in a multinational melee. U.S. destroyers arrived, their Tomahawk missiles obliterating Venezuelan coastal batteries in earth-shaking blasts. A Venezuelan submarine surfaced, launching torpedoes that rocked a U.S. frigate, debris flying in the blast. Coast Guard teams boarded Venezuelan vessels, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat on pitching decks. Flames spread as spilled oil ignited, engulfing coastal villages. Satellite imagery showed the Caribbean ablaze, marking a savage phase of warfare that engulfed the region. The attack's fallout triggered a global sanctions crisis as nations condemned Venezuela, imposing bans that crippled its economy. Oil exports halted, causing shortages that rocked global markets. An international coalition formed to enforce blockades, but Venezuela-backed hackers disrupted global banking, freezing assets in retaliation. Relief ships faced pirate attacks, with cargo looted in the chaos. The U.S. led a multinational effort to restore maritime security, but rogue factions emerged, blending state and criminal actions. The crisis paused major warfare, but a fractured economy and persistent threats signaled an unstable future. The Ukraine-Russia war has seen numerous surprise attacks, with Russia's superports emerging as critical strategic targets. Ukraine often leverages intelligence to time its strikes, while Russia holds celebrations to boost morale. In 2025, a Ukrainian attack on a Russian superport during a commander's celebration shifted the war's dynamics, shocking the world. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a perfectly timed ambush to an unexpected outcome that left everyone reeling. On a crisp evening in 2025, at the Novorossiysk superport on the Black Sea, Russian senior commanders gathered for a victory celebration, complete with vodka and fireworks. Ukraine had been monitoring through intelligence, waiting for the moment when all were present. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones glided silently, confirming the target. Suddenly, a 3,000-kilogram guided bomb from a Ukrainian jet screamed down, piercing the port's concrete defenses. The explosion shook the sea, debris flying like a tempest, and the superport collapsed in a blaze of fire. Alarms wailed across Russia. Rescue teams scrambled, but the devastation was immense. The battlefield turned into a fiery abyss, setting the stage for a ferocious naval port war. Russia struck back instantly, launching Caliber missiles from nearby warships, pounding Ukrainian positions in Odessa with devastating force. Russian Su-34 jets roared in, dropping bombs on Ukrainian bunkers, shaking the city to its core. Ukraine countered with lightning airstrikes on Russian bases in Crimea, targeting munitions depots. A brutal air battle erupted, with jets from both sides clashing in deadly chases. Black smoke choked the sky, relentless explosions trembling the ground, transforming the Black Sea into a chaotic war zone where every minute pulsed with danger. The conflict surged into hybrid naval-air warfare with terrifying speed. Russia deployed nuclear submarines to hunt Ukrainian fleets, triggering radioactive leaks and underwater clashes. Ukraine retaliated with underwater drones, destroying Russian ships in massive subsurface explosions. In the skies, AI-driven drones collided, bursting into fireballs that illuminated the night. Ukrainian hackers infiltrated Russian command systems, disrupting submarine orders, while Russia countered by crippling Ukraine's power grid. The war expanded as allies joined, turning the Black Sea into a multi-layered flashpoint where naval and air forces fused in pandemonium. Russia launched a massive ground offensive, aiming to seize Ukrainian ports to dominate the Black Sea. Tank convoys rolled into Mykolaiv, sparking ferocious urban battles. Ukraine responded with rapid ambushes, using guided missiles to incinerate Russian armor. A colossal explosion destroyed a Russian nuclear depot, unleashing radioactive fallout and displacing thousands. Neighboring nations were drawn in, with Turkey bolstering its borders. The global economy reeled as oil prices skyrocketed from disrupted shipping routes, and satellite imagery showed vast regions shrouded in smoke, marking an unprecedented phase of savage warfare. The attack's fallout triggered a global humanitarian crisis.
Destroyed infrastructure forced millions to flee, flooding borders into Europe and Russia. Refugee camps overflowed, diseases spreading in the chaos as international aid struggled to keep pace. The US and Europe organized emergency relief, but insurgent groups exploited the turmoil to rise. Autonomous robots cleared radioactive zones, while relief convoys delivered supplies under fire. Russia and Ukraine, facing humanitarian disaster, were forced into a temporary ceasefire, but new rebel factions emerged from the chaos. The crisis paused the war, but swelling refugee flows and persistent disease threats signaled an unstable future.